After losing my husband, I thought my parents' help would save me. I had no idea they'd try to steal my son. From fake evidence to forged signatures and a secret custody plot, I nearly lost everything before the truth finally came out. My story is about grief, betrayal, and the fight every mother hopes she'll never have to face. Would you trust your own family, if it meant risking everything? When my husband died, I honestly thought my life had already hit rock bottom. I was 35, widowed, and suddenly the only parent to our 8-year-old son, Ethan. We'd lost James in a freak car accident on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day you forget until it breaks your world apart. One minute he was texting me that he'd be home in 20, the next I was getting a call from a state trooper. The days after felt like a fog. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just moved through space like I was borrowing someone else's body. Ethan kept asking when Daddy was coming home. And when I finally had to explain that he wasn't, I watched something in him break. It was the kind of look a mother never forgets. That's when my parents, Donna and Greg, stepped in. They insisted they wanted to help. At first, it felt like a godsend. I was drowning, and they offered a life raft. My mom would pick Ethan up from school. My dad would take him to the park on weekends. They even cleaned up around the house, cooked meals, stayed overnight sometimes when I felt like I couldn't get out of bed. For a while, I let it happen. I was numb, and their presence filled the void. I even felt grateful, maybe they were doing what any loving grandparents would do. Donna kept calling it pitching in and said James would have wanted them close. But then little things started bothering me. I noticed Donna scolding Ethan in front of me, sometimes snapping at him in ways I wouldn't. When I'd ask her about it, she'd smile and say, "It's just how I raised you, honey. He'll be fine." Once, I found Greg teaching Ethan how to use a handsaw, a real one, in their garage. No gloves, no eye protection. I flipped out, and Greg just laughed, told me I was being dramatic. They started undermining me in front of Ethan. If I said no to more screen time, Donna would quietly hand him her iPad. If I grounded him for talking back, Greg would sneak him out for ice cream. Then, one afternoon, I overheard Donna on the phone with a friend while I was in the hallway. She said, "It's been hard, but Greg and I are finally feeling like we have our boy back." Our boy. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I don't know if she meant Ethan. I don't know if she meant something else. But it lodged in my chest like a splinter. I started paying closer attention. There were other moments, offhand comments that seemed innocent but gnawed at me later. Greg telling Ethan, "You're lucky to have us now." Donna calling me fragile when she thought I couldn't hear. Once, I caught Ethan calling her Mama D, and when I asked where that came from, she said he made it up. It was subtle. Creeping. Like mold behind wallpaper. And I kept thinking, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm just raw from the grief. Maybe I should be thankful they care so much. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Not at all. The day I realized something was seriously wrong wasn't loud. It wasn't a big argument or a screaming match. It was quiet. Subtle. And it stuck with me like a thorn under the skin. Ethan had come home from a weekend sleepover at my parents' place, and while I was unpacking his overnight bag, I found a folded piece of paper tucked into one of the side pockets. At first, I thought it was something from school, a drawing or a worksheet, but when I unfolded it, my stomach dropped. It was a mock schedule for Ethan. A rigid list of daily routines: wake up at 6:30, eat only protein-based breakfasts, 45 minutes of piano, no screen time unless educational, lights out at 8 sharp. At the bottom was a note written in Donna's handwriting. "This is our plan to bring some structure back into Ethan's life. He thrives with us." Our plan. I didn't say anything that night. I just sat in the kitchen long after Ethan went to bed, rereading that list until the paper felt thin in my fingers. I wanted to believe it was just overstepping. Maybe it was misguided concern. But our plan? Since when did they get to decide how my son was raised? The next morning, I brought it up carefully, politely, hoping I could set a boundary without making it a war. Donna smiled like she always did when she was about to ignore me completely. "You've been through so much, sweetie. We're just trying to help. Children need routine." Greg chimed in, not even looking up from his coffee. "We've raised kids before. We know what we're doing." That's when it started to escalate. They began making suggestions that weren't really suggestions. They wanted Ethan to start going to a private school near their house. Donna brought me pamphlets, talked about how his education is too important to leave to public schools. When I reminded her we didn't have the money for that, she said, "We've already started the application. We'll help with tuition. Just sign here." She had the form. It already had my name typed out on it, along with a signature that looked like mine. I didn't sign it. But it made something in me snap. I told them they were crossing a line. That Ethan was my son. That I appreciated the help, but they needed to respect my rules. Donna went cold. Greg stood up and said, "We just want what's best for him. And frankly, Monica, you're not yourself these days." That sentence echoed in my mind for hours after I left their house. I started pulling back. Limiting visits. Keeping communication shorter. But every time I tried to distance us, they'd guilt-trip me. Donna would text, "Ethan misses us. Don't punish him because you're hurting." Greg sent an email about grandparents' rights, linking an article with a highlighted quote about how courts were starting to recognize grandparents as essential caretakers. They made me feel like I was the villain. One night, Ethan asked if he could stay with Grandma and Grandpa for the whole weekend, like before. When I asked why, he shrugged. "Because I feel safe there." That broke me. I couldn't help but wonder, what were they saying when I wasn't around? I needed a break. A chance to catch my breath. So I told myself one weekend wouldn't hurt. They could have Ethan Saturday night, bring him back Sunday morning. I'd regroup, figure out how to set firmer boundaries. I had no idea I was walking right into their trap. I dropped Ethan off at my parents' house that Saturday around 5 p.m. Donna greeted him with open arms and a plate of fresh-baked cookies, while Greg ruffled his hair like they hadn't seen him in years. I kissed Ethan on the forehead, told him to behave, and promised I'd see him the next morning. He waved from the doorway, grinning. That would be the last time I felt at peace for a very long time. Sunday morning, I texted Donna around 9:30 a.m., "Let me know what time you want to drop Ethan off." No reply. Around noon, I called. No answer. I waited an hour. Then called again. Still nothing. I tried Greg's phone. Straight to voicemail. At 3:17 p.m., I got a text from Donna. "Greg isn't feeling well. We had to go to the hospital. Can you come pick Ethan up later in the week? It's been stressful." No details. No explanation. I replied immediately. "What hospital? Is he okay? Where's Ethan?" No response. I don't know how else to describe what hit me. Dread doesn't cut it. It was instinct. A full-body alarm. Something wasn't right. I got in the car and drove straight to the hospital Donna mentioned in the text, St. Luke's. I knew the place well. It's where James had been taken after the accident. My heart pounded the entire drive. When I reached the ER desk and asked for Greg Palmer, the nurse checked the system, then looked up at me with confusion. "There's no one by that name checked in today." "Are you sure?" Donna Palmer said. "I'm sorry. There's no one here under that name." I stood there frozen. Mouth dry. Hands shaking. I called Donna again. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Greg's not at the hospital. Where is Ethan?" No reply. That's when I drove straight to their house. I barely remember the drive. I just remember the cold knot in my stomach tightening with every street I passed. When I pulled up to their driveway, all the lights were on. Ethan's bike was in the yard. I didn't bother knocking. I pounded on the door. After a full minute, it opened. Donna stood there, calm as anything, holding a mug of tea like she hadn't just sent me on a wild goose chase. "Where is he?" I asked, pushing past her. "Monica, please. Where is my son?" I stormed down the hallway and into the guest bedroom, and there he was. Ethan. Sitting on the floor in his pajamas, coloring in a book. He looked up at me, wide-eyed and confused. "Mom? Why are you mad?" I dropped to my knees and hugged him. He smelled like cinnamon and sleep. I felt tears rise but held them back. "Get your things, baby. We're going home." Greg appeared behind me, blocking the hallway. "He's fine," he said flatly. "You're overreacting." "Move," I said. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Donna stepped in. "We weren't trying to scare you. We just needed more time to." "To what? Lie to me? Keep my son without telling me where he was?" "You're not thinking clearly," Greg said. "We've spoken to someone." I pushed past them both, grabbed Ethan's bag, and walked out the door without another word. Once we were in the car, I dialed the police. I didn't care that they were my parents. I didn't care that it would burn every bridge behind me. Something was very, very wrong, and I wasn't going to wait until it got worse. The officer showed up at my place about an hour later, after I filed the report over the phone. I half expected him to treat it like a misunderstanding, some kind of family squabble blown out of proportion. But after I walked him through everything, the fake hospital visit, the refusal to return Ethan, the history of overstepping, his expression turned serious. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. He asked if I had any written communication. I handed over my phone. The text from Donna. The missed calls. The schedule I'd found in Ethan's bag. The forged-looking private school form was still in my kitchen drawer. The officer took photos, made notes, and told me a detective would follow up soon. I barely slept that night. Ethan curled up next to me, his small hand tucked into mine like he used to when he was little. He didn't ask questions. He just seemed wary. Like he sensed something had shifted. The next morning, I dropped him off at school and got a call just before lunch from a Detective Alvarez. He wanted to speak in person. We met at the station, and he didn't waste time. "Miss Palmer," he said, "has anyone ever suggested your parents were trying to take custody of your son?" I blinked. "What? No. Why would they? We received a flagged inquiry last week from a family mediator. Your parents had been meeting with her to discuss grandparent custody rights. Apparently they've been building a file." "A file?" My mouth went dry. I asked what kind of file. Detective Alvarez opened a folder and slid a photo across the table. It was a blurry picture of Ethan, taken outside my house, on a day I recognized. He was sitting on the porch steps in mismatched clothes, hair uncombed, eating dry cereal from a plastic cup. It looked bad. But I remembered that day. It had been a sick day, and I just let him sit outside for a few minutes to get some air. He'd asked for cereal, and I'd given it to him in his favorite cup. There was no neglect. Just a sick kid at home. "They've staged photos like this," Alvarez said, "to support their claim that you're mentally unfit after your husband's death." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He showed me copies of statements from people I'd never heard of, supposedly friends or neighbors claiming I was unstable. One letter said they'd seen me yelling at invisible people in my front yard. Another said I often left Ethan home alone while I went on drinking binges. Every word was a lie. When I told him I didn't recognize any of the names, he nodded. "That's what we thought. We traced two of them to an online service that sells fake testimonials, mostly used for businesses trying to boost reviews. Your parents paid for character witnesses." I felt nauseous. Alvarez wasn't finished. He pulled out another document, a change request form from Ethan's school, attempting to remove me from his emergency contact list and replace my name with Donna's. "That was caught by a secretary," he said. The signature was forged. My hands were shaking. I could barely speak. How is this even possible? I whispered. They're my parents. Some people convince themselves they're saving a child, he said. Even if it means destroying the parent. When I picked Ethan up that afternoon, I hugged him tighter than I had in weeks. He smiled and asked if we could get ice cream. I said yes. That night, I filed for an emergency protective order. I knew I was in for a fight. But I had no idea just how far they'd already gone. The emergency hearing happened within days. I stood in the courtroom, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the judge's questions. My attorney presented the forged documents, the fraudulent testimonies, the CPS calls. Yes, there had been 2 anonymous reports that were thankfully dismissed after home visits, and the forged school form. Each piece laid out a timeline of manipulation that made my stomach churn. Donna and Greg sat across from me, expressionless. Donna clutched a rosary in her lap like she was the one under attack. Greg stared forward, stone-faced. When the judge issued the temporary restraining order, no contact with Ethan, supervised visits to be considered pending full investigation, I felt a strange mix of triumph and grief. These were my parents. People who'd raised me. People I used to call every Sunday. Now they were legally barred from being near my child. But that was only the beginning. Detective Alvarez kept digging. More came out. Donna had tried to enroll Ethan in a private school closer to their home weeks before they told me anything. She had printed enrollment packets, filled them out, and get this, forged my signature again. It wasn't even a good forgery. She'd spelled my middle name wrong. The school flagged it and called my listed number, but Donna had already tried to have that changed too. She told them my number was no longer valid and gave them her own. It would have worked if not for a staff member who thought it was strange that Monica suddenly sounded 20 years older and referred to Ethan as her little man. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. Even walking Ethan to school felt like a battlefield. I changed all my passwords, set up a security system, and had a friend install cameras on the front and back doors. Then came the call I wasn't expecting. The district attorney had decided to pursue criminal charges. Donna and Greg were arrested the following week, charged with attempted custodial interference, fraud, falsifying legal documents, and filing false reports. I didn't tell Ethan everything. Just that Grandma and Grandpa were in trouble and couldn't see us for a while. He didn't cry. He didn't even ask many questions. He just nodded and said, "Can we still go to the zoo next weekend?" The civil suit was next. My lawyer pushed hard. We argued emotional distress, reputation damage, and legal costs. I wasn't doing it for the money. I just wanted the record to show what they'd done. That they couldn't just hide behind the facade of concerned grandparents. They tried to settle privately. Offered to pay my legal fees and drop the custody request. I refused. During the deposition, Donna finally cracked. She sobbed and said I wasn't coping, that Ethan was better off with them. That she didn't regret trying to save him. She called herself a savior. Greg barely spoke until the judge ordered them to hand over emails they'd tried to delete. Messages to the fake witnesses. One of them even included this line from Greg. "Once we get custody, Monica won't have a reason to fight anymore." It was there in black and white. Their intent. Their manipulation. Their plan to take my son away from me while pretending to help. I won the civil case. The court awarded me damages. They were forced to sell their vacation home to pay the judgment. But none of it gave me back what I lost. That came later, in a way I didn't expect. The news spread through our small town like wildfire. One day I was just another grieving widow trying to hold her life together. The next, I was that woman who called the police on her own parents. Whispers followed me at the grocery store. People stared at drop-off. Some offered quiet support, but others, old church friends of my parents, shot me icy glares or sent me condescending emails about forgiveness. I wanted to crawl into a hole and hide. But every time I looked at Ethan, I remembered why I couldn't. The biggest blow came when the story broke at my parents' church. A letter from my lawyer detailed the facts, the forgery, the false reports, the scheme to remove me from Ethan's life. The pastor read it aloud one Sunday after the verdict. I heard from a friend that Donna sobbed in the pew and Greg stormed out. Their social circle evaporated overnight. The friends who had defended them dropped away. My parents were forced to withdraw from every committee, every charity, every little group that made up the fabric of their lives. Even their neighbors, the ones who'd always praised their devotion to family, kept their distance now. And still, Donna tried to reach me. She sent letters, all of them intercepted by my lawyer. Some were pleading, apologetic, some blamed me for airing family business and destroying their lives. One accused me of brainwashing Ethan. I never responded. 4 weeks, Ethan seemed unmoored. He'd ask about his grandparents, sometimes wistful, sometimes angry. I told him the truth, in the simplest way I could. Grandma and Grandpa did things that weren't safe for us. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't mine. But we need to keep our family safe now. He nodded. He was quiet for a long time after that. But slowly, the questions faded. We fell into new routines, just us. Pizza on Fridays. Long walks on Sundays. Sometimes he'd come into my room at night and ask if I was still sad. I told him I was, but I was also glad we had each other. And then, in a moment that felt both small and enormous, I wrote a public letter of my own. I posted it online. Not to attack my parents, but to explain. I laid out everything, how grief had made me vulnerable, how easily control can hide behind concern, how even those closest to you can cross lines they can never uncross. It went viral in our town. Messages poured in from strangers, from other mothers, from people I barely knew at all. Some said I was brave. Some shared stories of their own families trying to control or undermine them. Some just said, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." It didn't fix everything. But it gave me a kind of peace I hadn't felt since James died. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I felt free after the dust finally settled. There was an emptiness I didn't expect. I had spent so many months fighting, for Ethan, for the truth, for our safety, that when it was over, I didn't know how to just be. The house felt strangely quiet without the constant tension of waiting for the next intrusion, the next lie, the next attack. But as weeks passed, something in me began to heal. Ethan and I built new traditions together. We started a little garden in the backyard, just the two of us, turning over the dirt every Saturday morning. He chose strawberries and sunflowers. I let him get his hands dirty. Some afternoons, I'd catch him watching me with the kind of trust one worried I might never earn back, but it was still there, strong and simple. Therapy helped, for both of us. Ethan talked about feeling like he'd done something wrong. I reassured him, again and again, that none of this was his fault, that grown-ups can make terrible choices, even the ones we love. That sometimes, love gets twisted by fear and control. I stopped blaming myself for not seeing the signs sooner. Grief can make you blind, and sometimes the ones you trust most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. The restraining order became permanent. The judge made it clear that Donna and Greg were not to contact us, ever. Their names became a warning in the school system and at every doctor's office. I kept every document, every letter, every court ruling locked away, not out of paranoia, but out of hard-earned caution. Occasionally, I'd see their old friends in town, the ones who still believed their version of events. Sometimes I got looks that hurt. But more often, I got kindness from strangers who had read my letter or heard my story. People who whispered, "You did the right thing." One evening, Ethan crawled into my lap and wrapped his arms around my neck. "I'm glad you're my mom," he said, voice muffled against my shoulder. "I'm glad it's just us." I hugged him tight and promised, "It will always be us. No matter what." That night, I let myself cry not out of fear, or sadness, or anger, but out of relief. Out of pride. Out of love for the little boy I'd nearly lost, and for the woman I had become fighting for him. My parents' betrayal cut deep. But what they couldn't destroy, what they never understood, was the strength that comes from loving someone more than yourself. From refusing to let go, even when it feels impossible. We survived. We healed. We started over.